So I'm down here in Chicago, and right next to me is a semi. But do you know what they should do? They should have ferries at Navy Pier on the backside where they just created those new boats. They can have a ferry on the backside, and trucks can go to the ferry, and this would only be for truck traffic. And they can ferry them around the Skyway or ferry them across the Michigan, and it's only for semis. No pedestrian traffic, only for commercial traffic. And it would be out of Navy Pier. Do you know how much business that would get all year round? And then Waukegan, their pier, and you put a ferry system in Waukegan for just semis. We're talking logistical movement. And if you can take a lot of the semis out of the system that way, then it opens up room for more car traffic and it alleviates car traffic. So, and then the trucks can get from point A to point B, and the ferry does the driving so the drivers can take a nap. And they should have sleeping compartments on the ferry. Oh yes, sleeping or chairs that decline, and you can take a nap on the ferry. Think about that, taking a nap. Truly, they have soothing music and everything, and the driver can take a nap as the ferry is going across. And even if it's 15 or 30 minutes, power nap, and then you wake up and have a little coffee. Truly, they get the synapses running again because it takes a little bit. So coffee will give you a little quick start, a little bit of caffeine, not a lot. But it'll get the synapses going, and then you're back off again, and you took a little power nap as the ferry is going. And I don't understand why we don't have ferries. Again, think about the money Navy Pier could be bringing in all winter long in logistical on the backside, but all year long. So that backside is perfect for semi-traffic, and it wouldn't interfere. And you have to figure out that street by Lake Point Tower. It goes eastbound, but only to enter Lake Point Tower. But you would make that a permanent and move it to the other side and make it a two-way street. You would have to reconfigure it to be a two-way street. Truly, it would get reconfigured to be a two-way street. And so you would just reconfigure it, and then you can get your semi-traffic, and it goes right up, right to the backside of Navy Pier, right onto the ferry, right onto the lake. So think about that. And I'm thinking about Brett, the WGN traffic reporter. And I was wondering why all these traffic, I'm just talking about the girls, they tend to be very attractive. And then I think it's because it's a high reward position with low stress, meaning they get better and better info, and they have, the weather is getting it, but it still has more stress, and people get pissed when weather people make mistakes. And they do. And it has more stress because they get feedback. And traffic has very low stress, but it has very good pay. And it can be much more dynamic than it ever was before. So there's lots for them to do. But it seems to attract very attractive females, which I like. Now, you got to go back to the original ESPN. And the original ESPN with Chris Berman all the way back, there was a female who I liked. Now, she wasn't highly attractive, but she wasn't ugly either. Now, Peggy Krasinski, she was more of a locker room reporter, and she wasn't on the camera for long. And a lot of her articles went into the paper, but she gave the mic to them, and she wasn't in the shot. So she was one thing. If you go back over Peggy Krasinski, she's not that attractive. Now, she was slender, but still not highly attractive. But what she did, and I don't know if she did it intentionally, she knew a lot about sports, and she was very smart about sports, but she also stayed off camera. She wasn't in the shot. Her microphone was in the shot. She asked a question and have them commentary back, but she didn't show her face a lot. And the funny thing is, you got to understand this. And you're going to say everybody's got to change their conscience. And that's fine, godly people and so on. But there's only so much you can take. And everybody's making you bend over to accommodate everybody who isn't willing to get in shape or isn't willing to take care of their facial looks and everything else. And it gets very unbelievably hard because they're not seeking excellence, and you keep on giving them grace by, I'm going to watch. Like Melissa Lee, I like her a lot, but that tooth did bother me. After a while of watching her, where Betty Lou, who was on Bloomberg, she didn't have that. And she's just all around attractive. And what she did was, and Nancy Lou here at WGN kind of did it too, she changed her glass frames, the shape of them and the color of them. So Betty Lou would wear different color frames and different shaped glasses. I guess she needed glasses, truly, she needed glasses to see. But she was an attractive girl, but she would augment because most of the time it's just an upper body shot. And most of the time it's above her breast. And so you get this shoulder and above shot. And she would wear really different glasses in that. And she looked so cute. I truly and incredibly adore that girl. And I do like Nancy Lou in that. Judy Sue and Nancy Lou. But the thing is, it wears on. Like Judy Sue has a little mold on the end of her nose. And it's not like the mold with Cindy Crawford or with Marilyn Monroe. It's strategically placed, but on the nose, I hate nose piercings. I still can't get over them. Every time I look, in all these years, and my nephew who married a girl, she has it, and I just can't. I try and try, but with Indian women, I accept it. And why? Because it's their cultural thing. And some reason I don't have this negativity towards Indian women when they have the piercing. But everybody else, I have a big negativity. It's like Samoans. I like The Rock. But Samoans had the rite of passage band in that. And I don't have negativity towards Samoans with tattoos. But again, other people with tattoos, like this woman in the news story Inside Edition, she had this big tattoo. I have strong negativity towards her. And it's probably because my subconscious, and I feel it, my subconscious knows they shouldn't have that. And so I've never had a problem, and this goes a long back with Samoans, with people, they do these things because it's a rite of passage band, and they have certain tattoos that represent certain things. And even the eye drop with prisoners and that, I don't have negativity feeling. And gangs that have the teardrops and that, representing how many people they killed. The funny thing is, I don't have negativity towards them, or the jailhouse tattoos, because they do it with the needle. But the thing is, those jailhouse tattoos, they spread a lot of disease doing them. Just to let you know, they infect people. They don't cleanse the needle. They don't do things correctly. But the thing is, I accept them. because it's part of that culture. So I don't feel the negativity. And maybe because it's something that's forced upon them, and truly is. They demand you, like Russian gang members, and I've been around all kinds of biker gangs and so on, and I didn't feel this immense negativity towards them, Hells Angels, you name it, but I didn't feel this immense negativity because those tattoos were required to be certain things. They recognize you through the markings on your body, who you are. So when strangers, like you go to other Hells Angels gangs, and you have certain tattoos that shows you are a certain level of, you're an enforcer, like my friend Chopper. He was in a biker gang who was Dave's roommate, and we were very good friends, and he was older, and we used to talk about it. But there's certain types of tattoos that show that you're an enforcer. And my friend Glenn, who was a cop in Arizona, studied gang tattoos because they tell you who you're dealing with, where they are within the organization and everything else. But does a beat cop know that? He should. Because he doesn't know. An enforcer, those people are usually packing. And they put people to waste, as Chopper explained. And waste meaning to sleep, dirt naps. And they're packing. And they're enforcers because they're very good at combat. And so police have to be more careful around them. But they don't know that. And prosecutors are supposed to be logging all this information when they take them in. And that's the bad thing. They don't do full body pictures. But they need to black out things. But they need to know if they have nipple piercings and everything else. So when they take them in, they have to do totally nude pictures. Truly. To see any markings on them, because certain piercings and other things reprimand things too. So the thing is, they're very much out of the loop, which runs them into very serious problems. Like you're dealing with cartel members and you don't know who are enforcers and who aren't. That you're dealing with more of a businessman and you don't have to worry. But Al Capone here in Chicago, he was an enforcer who did a coup and killed his higher-ups to take over. So when you're dealing with Capone, as they show you in the movie, you got to be very careful. Unlike Tony the Tuna, who took over, that I knew, the Chicago Mafia, he didn't grow up as an enforcer. He grew up in management. Truly. He didn't grow up in collections and enforcement. He grew up in managing. So he wasn't out there doing hits and that. He was a smart, very smart guy. And he grew up in management, like the founding fathers of the mafia here. And you see them, not Muggsy, he was an enforcer. These others, Mylan Lenski, he was management. And so when you're dealing with him, he's not packing the kill and so on, and he doesn't know. He has other people do the dirty work, and that's not his skill set. So he's not going to be a threat. Very minimal, unlikely threat. But the other ones, depending on how fair, they'll go down dying. And so you have to understand who are the enforcers. All gangs, all criminal organizations have people that are enforcers. The Catholic Church had the knights that were their enforcers. So the priests and that, they didn't do the stuff and they weren't trained, and you got one of them, well, likelihood you're not at any physical threat. But if you came upon one of their enforcers, one of the knights, Well, and he's going to go down dying. And you have to understand that, who you're dealing with. And that's a big problem, and prosecutors don't understand that, because it also means their language when they get out of prison. What are they grown up on? Mano y mano. Enforcers grow up on mano y mano. And so when they go to prison and come out, like, Tulsa King, he was an enforcer. Well, when he comes out, his thing is retribution. But when you get the higher ups and they come out, which you see in The Godfather and that, they might order somebody, but they're not going to do the retribution themselves. And they might not do retribution at all. So you have to understand their language. And this goes for regular people, like domestic violence. What type of domestic violence? Was it verbal? Was it physical? Was it poisoning? What type of violence did they do? This is their go-to. And so if they're going to do retribution, they're going to do it with the ways they know, unless they're going to outsource. And depending who they are, they have connections. So you won't get them like the guy in Tucson who decided to blow up the other Mexican restaurant. He wasn't a gang member. He wasn't in cartels. So he didn't have connections. But if you have somebody that is a made man like in the Italian mafia and they get out, they have lots of connections. So if they want to outsource, it's very easy for them to outsource. So when you release gang members and that, you have to understand what is their connections. What is their ability to outsource? So prosecutors are idiots. And even FBI agents are idiots. Like with serial killers, you get their motive, then you get their tool of choice and everything else. But again, how do they get the access and many other things does matter. So, and that goes back in going back and looking at resumes. So they need LinkedIn. Oh yeah. FBI agents and that need LinkedIn. They need to see what type of education they got in elementary, high school. Like the Unabomber. How did he get his bombing training? Truly, where did he get it at? MIT or anything else? So you're looking for these people that have these capabilities to do the things. So law enforcement has to become much smarter at what they're doing, but they can use LinkedIn and other things to analyze. Hurting me doesn't get you anywhere, but it does get me stronger, threatening you that God's going to burn you. But I operate out of pure self-defense. So angering me just gets me more defensive. So I'll never be guilty of a crime. All you get is me more defensive. And so it's impossible. And you can keep on running at me, but it's impossible. That is not how I operate. So all you get is me being more defensive. Like when the doctor said he can't treat my ear, nose, and throat, doctor. Well, that's a bunch of bullshit. I pulled up 100 and something. It must have been over 100 and something different forms of treatment and expanding. And he doesn't give me one option, and he tells me there's nothing he can do. And then he didn't even look in my ears where he did. He didn't tell me if there was any earwax. Where my Hispanic doctor, at least he looked at my ears and he said, in the one ear perfectly clean and the little one, the other ear has a little bit of earwax, but no, nothing significant at all. Just a little bit. So, but he didn't even do that. Now, they did do a sound test, but she didn't go over the sound test with the spectrum analysis. And they didn't give me a copy of it. So I can take that information and find somebody else, like to the hearing aid specialist, and fine-tune it, and this is where I'm missing on the spectrum, and then I don't have the tinnitus. They say, oh, well, it's a diminished spectrum. Well, fill in the spectrum with a hearing aid. Tinnitus gone. Truly. If it's because the hairs are damaged, then you just have a hearing aid that has a limited spectrum. Not full spectrum, just a limited spectrum. And fills in only that spectrum. The rest of it you can naturally hear. You don't want to kill off the rest of the hairs, so you fill in the missing spectrum. Then you don't get the anymore. It's gone. If that's it, if that's what it is, then just filling the mixing piece of spectrum and there's no more tinnitus. It's that freaking simple. Truly. It's gone. And they don't have to do anything but fill in the spectrum. See what spectrum you're missing and tune the hearing aid, which they already have all the technology to that spectrum. So they don't have to do that linear where they're doing sound cancellation or anything else. Complete the spectrum. Because they don't have that spectrum, so the brain fills it in. Give them the spectrum and no more tinnitus. It's simple. And it's true. Fill in the missing spectrum and it's gone. That's all you have to do. So I don't understand. Talk about unbelievable stupidity. God's in a fry them. They should have solved my problem immediately. And I'll give you an FYI. He said he'd sit back and see if you solve my problems. And if you don't solve my problems, no matter what my problem is, if you create them, you are condemned. And if I have issues and you don't solve them, you're condemned. So anyone who creates an issue for me burns in hell. And anyone who refuses to solve my issue burns in hell. So as he said, my life should be incredibly blessed. I earned it. You scumbags didn't. And somehow you sit above me, which is considered blasphemy. Which is considered, he doesn't care you own a business. You're filth. You bow down. So all these people who kicked me out, they're going to burn. So you think, oh, I have right. Go ahead. And that's why I told him, go ahead. Do that to me. Shut the door in my face. Kick me out. And you can. Like at Whole Foods. Those people are going to burn. And I'll give you an FYI. He said anyone that hurts me in any way, shape, or form, it doesn't matter if I feel gratitude towards them again. It's kind of like Stockholm Syndrome. The people who persecuted you now are doing good things for you. And he said it should have never happened in the first place. That was the warning in 2016, that I only deserved goodness. Do you know I stepped up the amount of goodness from my first breakdown? Truly, when I did all the stuff I had before, I did all unbelievable goodness going up to it. And God prepared me. He told me way in advance that it was coming. I just didn't know how. But I could deal with that. And my question to God was, how can I be better? And I was better. Unbelievable. So how you could hurt me is unfreaking fathomable. Unfathomable. I stepped up all my blood donations. Get my life source records. Unbelievable. Platelets and blood. I gave every Martin Luther King birthday too. I did unbelievable independent around Chicago, feeding the homeless on my own, giving them stuff, pamphlets. You think it was started in, 16? I was already doing that. I shared it with David Rim in my small group. They had no idea. It went in one ear and out the other. I was independently working with all the homeless in the city of Chicago and giving them rides and taking them in. They can tell you at the police department of Huron State. I had the one homeless guy. I called the Department of Human Services. They would pick him up. Truly. And if others, I've taken others to Pacific Gardens and other things and got them in. Now, one guy didn't take it. He took the free food and that, and he took off. He didn't want to. And others told me they didn't want to go in because they don't want anyone to tell them what to do and how to live their life. And I said, well, you're not independently wealthy. You have to be in wealth. So if you want that, then build a path to that. And there are private contractors where you can do Uber and that, but you have to apply by their rules when you do it. But you can do flex time, working now, not working. So there are things like Uber and Lyft that you can control your own schedule and be your own boss. So if you don't want anyone to tell you when to work and when not to work, there you go. Work for Uber and Lyft. And there are other gig economy jobs that you can do. But hurting me is not an option. So, the warning in 16, and you stole my practice and stole everything from me and made my life hurt. Every single thing I have now, I never had before. You gave me a whole new host of issues that I never had. You made my life exponentially worse. He doesn't care about the Chicago cops. When it comes to me, they're garbage and filth. And if they stand over me, they burn. They got to know their place. But you keep on running them at me like they're my authority. They're not my authority. Do you know the Pope? Go to the Pope. Vatican City. What is Vatican City? An independent country. Sovereign. And who's the commander-in-chief? The Pope. And he has the Swiss Guard. He has military. But he is king. There is no one above him. Except me. But that's what you don't understand. So you can't run government officials at me. You can't run authorities at me. I got into Platinum Wealth Solution. Nick's an owner. He's not my boss. I'm an independent agent. He can't, as Jason Hill told me, and we were out there, Nick has no authority to fire me. No authority to fire me. Nick cannot fire me. And he went over it, and we went over it together. And Jason Hill was with Singapore. You might not get along, and you can move managing partners. But as long as you don't do any securities violations or anything, which I never did, he has no authority to fire me. How he fired me is impossible. He had no authority to fire me. But funny, Jason was on my Facebook. He disappeared. But I looked it up, and he's right. Nick had no authority to fire me. If he didn't like me, I could have moved to another. And Jason wanted me to do a startup with him under Singapore in Florida. But no authority. So how he fired me, it's impossible. He had no authority to fire me. So he stole my money. He stole everything. And the funny thing is, Jason brought it up to me because he wanted me to move from Platinum Wealth to start a corporation, start an operation in Florida, me and him being the primary owners together, me and Jason. And Jason is a good friend of mine, and he wanted to be, so he's like, no, Nick can't fire you, and you can swap, and we can start this, and Nick can't do anything about it. Zero about it. You produced all that business on your own. He doesn't own it. You paid him the commissions and everything. You're an independent contractor. You own your book. He can't fire you. So what happened to me was incredibly illegal. And how the Securities and Exchange Commission, how the FINRA, who on my Facebook was a FINRA girl, beautiful girl, and she had tons of beautiful friends. She did. And now Kaylee, she's on my Instagram. But she was with FINRA. I have U.S. senators on my Facebook and other high-ranking government officials. I knew what was on my Facebook. I put them there. So I knew exactly what I was doing. Just like my LinkedIn. I had presidents of universities. I had the head of Fox News. The female was the head of Fox News. And many other very powerful people. But God told me to protect myself. So before I made my announcement in 2016, he told me to gather. And so I went out there and gathered very powerful people. And I left them on my social media. And when I closed them all down, they were all there. They were there like Draghi on Twitter and everything else, head of the European Central Bank. They were all there because God told me to put them there. Before I made my announcement, I needed to put the pieces of the puzzle in place. And the funny thing is, somewhere in 16 before, but I'm not getting, seemed like LinkedIn was stopping me in some way. But the point is, and if they did, if Facebook or in any of that stopped me and people abandoned me, well, they were chosen for a reason and they turned their back on me. They're going to fly. They were supposed to waste these motherfuckers. They were supposed to waste them. They were chosen to stand up against these pieces of garbage. To put them to waste. And so I shared all that with them intentionally. They were put there for a reason. And they were supposed to protect me. Instead, they abandoned me and put me to waste. They were supposed to be cleaning house. Failing to follow their calling. Like, the TV show, The Calling, or the other TV show I liked before that, when all this happened to me, God Friended Me. The show about Facebook, which was good, and it said God friended me on Facebook. And then he would feed them information, and they would go solve murder mysteries and other criminal mysteries. And it said, I'm a friend of God. But I liked that TV show. The black guy and white guy, I think, were the two leads. But the whole point is, that's what actually happened. And it was all put out so I would never get hurt again. That when I put out my announcement, I was like the Teflon Don. No one could take action against me without being put to waste. Well, that all failed. And you know what happens when you fail? The Lord in the Bible? You burn. You burn. Failure is not an option. As you will learn in the Bible, if you know Bible, failure of God, like with Moses and that, failure is not an option. Moses would have been put to waste. Like Judah, it only survived as it repented, but everyone else, they died or were broken up and sent into waste. But failure is not an option. Like this piece of shit tailgating. But again, how do you allow this harassment? Driving around in the city and they can harass you, and then you say about road rage. They cause road rage and they get away with it. And you allow them. In communities like Singapore, they take them out and they beat them. But you think they understand how mental trauma manifests into physical trauma. You don't. And so you have heart palpitations, you have panic attacks, you have all kinds of other things that the tailgater causes that turn into physical trauma. So countries like Singapore, who are much smarter, know that. So they're going to give them physical trauma by beating them. So they explain it, that the mental trauma can manifest into physical traumas, and these are the physical traumas, so now we're going to beat you. So you understand why you're being beaten. And then you're going to have to go through your healing process. And that's part of the suffering. And you deserved it. Isn't that what we did to Japan with the nuclear bombs? Take it all the way up. We said, because of your great sin, you're going to feel unbelievable pain. And that unbelievable pain is your punishment. And you're going to have to suffer through the healing process. And yes, we were there, but you still have to suffer. The black rain and everything else as the movie, but suffer. It's part of your penance, your atonement. But you allow them to get away with it, like the jaywalkers. This guy walking across the street right now. In Japan, you go to jail for 3 months. 3 months. Go to jail, you piece of crap. Like Preacher. Truly. You locked me up illegally. Like the black guy who made up charges against me. Made up charges against me. He said, and I deny to this day, he made up false charges against me. all these people made up false charges against me, and they hurt me, and they got away with it. And I go to jail. And then in jail, the Hispanic kid threatens to kill me. And literally telling me that he's going to kill me. And I'm just making my phone call, my one phone call to get my brother to pick me up. And I'm at the phone. I didn't say anything to him. I just walked up to the phone, made the phone call, and he started calling me names and telling me he wasn't to kill me. He used kill me, kill me, kill me, kill me. And so when the turnkey came, that's the guy who has the key. He came back after I made the phone call because it's me. They all know me. And the captain went on a rant and raving, and he apologized going in and apologized going out. Never to happen again. But he, right in front of me, drilled the two cops that brought me in, the male and female, both white, and he was screaming at them, and they had to stand there and take it, and he called them every name in the book right in front of me. You low-life, dirty pieces of fucking shit. Why did you bring him in? He doesn't belong here. And he just went off on them on purpose, right in front of me. And then he said, you got to go in, sign this, and so on. We went in. They didn't mugshot me or anything. Oh, no. And then I made my one phone call, and that's when the Hispanic guy threatened to kill me. And that's when I told the turnkey, you know what? Put me in the cell with him. Because I was going to severely hurt him. And do you know what happened when he heard that? He got very scared and started shaking. But he should have been shaking because I was going to hurt him. He thought I would fear him. But I demanded, and I was screaming at the turnkey. And he's like, I can't put you in the cell with him. And I was screaming, I'm going to waste you. You dare threaten my life. But that's a very big trigger word for me. That's one of my only trigger words. When you threaten to kill me. And that has been a very big trigger word. And if you use that word, anyone who's ever used that word, I take you out immediately. That's nothing. Once you use that word to me, I can take racist and everything else. I've had the Oakland Raiders spit on me, and I forgave it. When we were putting him into jail, he was roid raging and drunk, and anyone taking steroids shouldn't be drinking. Just to let you know, if you're on any kind of medical steroids, you shouldn't be consuming alcohol. But he was road raging. Oh, okay, I forgave him. But again, not so. That is something when he said he was going to kill me and repeated it many times. I told my brother, I didn't say a word until I hung up the phone. But he started shaking, and I demanded to be put, and he wouldn't put me in there. But he never said another word to me. He didn't say another word. And I wasn't kidding. I was going to hurt him, and my brother heard me screaming. Oh, I didn't stop screaming until I was picked up. And I walked by him when I was released. He was still in there. He didn't say a word to me. He was all the way at the back and very much incredibly scared. But rightfully so, because if he put me in there, I was going to hurt him immediately. He didn't have to do anything. Once that cell door opened, I was going to waste him. Zero tolerance. And you don't understand zero tolerance. You're sanctuary cities. You allow this bullshit in this country. You don't wipe these people out. I don't stand for certain things. I believe being incredibly tough on crime and punishing people. As I said, the only reason that I have respect for Ms. Park, because she was severely punished for crossing the border illegally. Not that I wanted it on her, but since she suffered so greatly and didn't benefit, I respect her. And I do love her. I don't respect any of this garbage. They write off their stuff. They do all kinds of putridness. Instead of working harder, getting an education, and it's all revenge. All those illegals, do you know that? Before in California, they had the ability to go to school, they had the ability to get these subsidies and to get education, and they didn't. What did Ms. Park do? Immediately, South Korea got education, unbelievably, and then got into one of the toughest universities, Columbia University. She fully took advantage. She called herself the learning machine, like a sponge, taking advantage of the opportunity. But none of those illegals, I don't have any respect for them. Only those that did the things they needed to do. And they shouldn't have came in illegally. But if they were willing to put in the work and go out and bring themselves up, and like I said, did Ms. Park take government aid? Yes, she did in South Korea, but she didn't ask for it. They gave it to her. They put her in it and kept her there. And through the process of vetting her, they gave her assistance. So it's something she had to take. And once she could get off of it, she got away from it as fast as possible. As fast as humanly possible. Purifying herself. Showing herself of worthiness. Worthiness. She got off the government subsidies as fast as possible. And she took care of her mother and her sister. But she didn't sit there on the spigot and come in and let me get the Medicaid forever and the welfare forever. She went and got off of it as fast as possible. Do you know why I respected the Chinese back in the day? Because they didn't want the government subsidies. And they would form together, and this was out of necessity, but they would form together and they would buy a restaurant. The people that came into this country opened a Chinese restaurant by my house. I used to go there. Had great respect for their entrepreneurship. They didn't take government subsidy. Those were family loans. No government loans. So you don't understand how they earn their money and open it up independent. So I can respect that. And okay, if you need it for a short period of time, I can see that. But to stay on it, to me, you're a piece of garbage. Like they said, Stephen Hawkins. Okay, say Stephen Hawkins took all that money in his initial downturn from government assistance. Do you know he got off of it as fast as possible? So he only took it for a short period of time, a quadriplegic, and got off. How about all these able-bodied black guys? 18 children, the one black guy had, with 18 different women. And he was praising the government and charity subsidies. Praising them. And he was impregnating all these women, and he bragged about not working. I put the link on Facebook. True story. And he bragged about it. And he was milking the system. And he was able-bodied, a good-looking, healthy black guy. And he didn't work. He milked the system. He didn't pay child support, nor did he take responsibility for any of the children and raise them. He left 18 single mothers. 18 single black mothers. And who knows if they had other kids, it didn't mention. But he left them fatherless. He left them without support. He did nothing for them. 18 black kids abandoned. And all these single black females holding the bag, making it very hard for them to get the education. Think about that. 18 black females. Now they have a baby. Now they got to raise the baby and everything else. And now it makes it very difficult for them to get advancement. And this is what the black males have been doing to the black females. And I don't understand, as I watched the one black gangbanger, and I still, to this day, regret not kicking that kid out. But he hit her once with a steel disc in the head, and she fell, but it was behind a car, and my friend Dean was with me. And then he grabbed me as I was going for the disc, because I wasn't going to let him hit her again. And I went for the disc, and Dean bear hugged me and pulled me back. And the thing, I didn't break his arms, as he said in my ear, he might have a gun too. But I told Lenny, who saw the whole thing, he was at Spy Bar, the doorman. I kept on telling him, call 911, call 911. That's when they were in the alleyway, before that girl got hit. I was begging him to call 911. He told me that he was calling downstairs to tell them to call 911. But it was coming out of Walter Payton's former place. And I think that was the Baja Beach Club. It might have been the Baja, because Walter Payton's place went out, and it turned into a black club, and I think it might have been Baja. Truly, the remnants of Baja, all black club. But anyways, they were allowing gangbangers in the club. That's why all those black clubs had, and that's why they had all the drive-bys, because the gangbangers bring gangbangers. And that makes that place a target for gangbanging. As I told my Chinese friends, not Chinese, what are they, Vietnamese or Taiwanese or Korean? I forget. They opened a place on State. And I told them, you can't have any Asian gangbangers, because they had an Asian crowd. And I said, if you get any Asian gangbangers and they're in the club, what happens? It makes it a drive-by target, because rival gangs can pick them off in the line while they're standing outside, and it makes the place a drive-by target. And I told them, you have to vet them, and you can't allow anyone in. And that's what the Oakland Raiders didn't do. They allowed all the gangbangers into the stadium. People didn't go to the stadium. The Oakland Raiders, no attendance. Because when you have gangs there, they have rival. There were fighting in the stands, shootings in the parking lot, and then people got robbed and mugged, and people were very scared. But garbage brings garbage. So I told him to make sure you have no Asian gangbangers. And what did he do? He didn't fully take it to the extent. And what happened? The place isn't there anymore. It used to be an old Melman's place. It was on State, just north of Division, on the west side of the street, in the old place my friend Johnny used to manage. Scottie Pippins used to hang out there. But anyways, drive-by shooting. The Liquor Commission revoked the license. Now, thank God, no one got shot. They missed. But it was one gangbanger trying to kill other gangbangers, rival gangs. And this is something that goes on globally. Do you know what they did in Cancun? They used to have gangs, they allowed them, the cartels and that, to go to places. My friends owned the island. They leased it from the government of Mexico. And they used to allow the cartels and that, and, criminals to come down to Cancun and hang out. Well, what happened? One time at Christie's, it's a club in Cancun, they were trying to kill a rival cartel, and they came in there with automatic weapons and shot and killed tons of people. Well, that was it for them allowing any criminal organizations on the island. And they bought the federales. They owned the federales. They paid the federales. And they made sure they weren't corrupt. And they kept all the cartels off the island. And they sent some people to put down those people that did the shootings, sending a message to the cartels. Kind of like Landman starts off talking about sending out the SEAL team and they're to come. Well, they actually went and put them down. And they made it clear that the cartels weren't welcome on the island. Truly. And what they had after the hurricane, and this is another thing you don't understand, they had a hurricane in Cancun. And what happens? Everybody left the island. But all the people that were vagrants and all that, they rushed into the island. And they stayed there during the hurricane. And then when the hurricane left and they came back, because everybody was going out, they didn't worry about people coming in. They had a flood of homeless people. So much they couldn't handle it. And they had all these beggars they never had before. All the beggars they never had before, because the hurricane created an opportunity for them to come in. So as everybody was running from the storm, to them it was worth risking their life to come in. And they came in and they wouldn't go out. And there were so many of them, they had a serious difficulty removing them. From my understanding, now they've reclaimed the island, but it took a long time. But the whole point is, when these negative things happen, bad people, and there's another movie where they tried to rob a Federal Reserve or whatever during the storm, but Ramo used to use the storm every time. He would come in behind the storm with his tanks, the sandstorms. He would hide behind them right in the beginning of the sandstorm. So as the sandstorm cleared, they were overwhelmed with the Germans, and it worked. But I think Patton flanked them, because you can be on the sides of the storm, and Patton flanked him. So the storm came in, and he came into a kill box. And so Patton was waiting on his left and right side, and Ramo came right into where he was going. And when the storm cleared, there was minimum resistance, and he moved in, and then the armor, Patton's armor, closed in from the right and left side, making the Panzers and everything very vulnerable, because they couldn't take him on head on, and he had artillery coming in from the sides, so he flanked them. He was on the outsides of the storm, on the opposite sides, and he came into, like Geronimo did with Custer, he led them down a narrow pathway, and they were right and left of them, flanking them, dropping their numbers. So first he led them through a canyon, and they picked off unbelievable amount of Custer's men in the canyon, and the ones that survived, even with repeating rifles and that, there was too few of them. So they just circled them, and they picked them off one by one. But Custer had to bleed them down and weaken them first. I mean, Geronimo had to weaken them first. So he led them through the narrow canyon, and that condensed all their men down the canyon path. Truly, you look it up, and he was able to pick off a ton of them. And they rushed to get out of it, and they did get out the other side. So Custer survived in that, but he lost a ton of men, and it was no match anymore. Even with automatic weapons and that, there was just too many of them. And that's not full machine guns then, repeating rifles. So they can shoot a couple shots and they have to reload. Where a machine gun, and that's where special forces need to understand how many rounds do they need of suppression fire. Truly, when you go into a situation, what can they put up against you? How many men? What type of artillery? RPGs? You know, they had the anti-aircraft guns, which those bullets are huge, but they put them on the back of the pickup trucks. Those are anti-aircraft guns. But if you shoot them at armor or anything else, they can go through because they're used to piercing planes that are high in the sky. So they're high velocity rounds that are very big, and they do severe damage to armor. And so they put the anti-aircraft guns. They weren't using them to shoot aircraft. They were using them to shoot military troops, so it can go through cinder block walls and everything. And they would put them on the back of the trucks. And so that's some serious firepower. They were built to shoot down planes, but they repurposed them. And that was very smart. Bin Laden and then repurposed them, and they can do serious damage to armor and everything. So those Humvees and everything, they can go right through them. So they can take out and literally shred a Humvee. So you have to understand, how are they getting these? These are very sophisticated weapons with very big casings in that. You have to have a certain type of machining and everything. This is not like, oh, I can build some bullets by hand and put them together. These things are big bullets. They're very big, and they take sophisticated machining to put them together. And so, how are they getting the guns and the ammunition? Because they have to be coming from someone that has the machining capability. Now, in World War II, we took out the ball bearing plants because tanks needed ball bearings, right? They had ball bearings, and the wheels can't roll without ball bearings. So if you take out the ball bearing plants, you don't have to worry about the other parts of the manufacturing. So the ball bearing plants were the big one. You don't have to worry about the fuel because the tanks can't move without ball bearings. So taking out the ball bearing plants, not the fuel depots or anything else, was the main mission of those bombing missions. Because they went into all armored personnel, all vehicles, all mechanized, even planes. The ball bearings go into planes, the propeller blade cycles and all that and things. So taking out the ball bearing plants destroyed their ability, and that's what happened with the Germans, is they had very limited ability to build new armor, to build new planes, and so on. Plus they lost the pilots in that, which we captured, where our pilots, through the French resistance and that, were able to get safety and come back. The Germans were captured. So it took a lot of men off the battlefield. So letting them go wasn't an option. But understanding this, they just took out the ball bearings. So how do you get those types of guns? They need a lot of metal. It's just like the missiles. You need rocket fuel. are you getting the fuel? How are you getting the guidance system? How are you getting the explosive ordnance for the rocket? Is it C4? Truly, do they use C4? Because you can use C4. You can put it in there, and with a pin that gets triggered upon impact, and it explodes. So it can be simple C4. So you have to understand what type of ordnance, explosive ordnance they're using, and that leads you to where they're getting it from. And then you have to look at the construction and everything, and it can tell you where the material comes from. And then where are they getting the fuel refined to be able to put it in there. And that's a big thing with Kim Jong-un. He doesn't have the balancing system right, and he doesn't have the rocket fuel right. And about the enrichment, it depends on how explosive. He could have nuclear, but very low explosive power. It all depends on how much implosion he can create to get an explosion. And that all depends on the density and everything. The enrichment process. So how good the enrichment process is. So when you're looking at Pakistan or any of them, even India and that, it's their ability to enrich to create this density. And the more density, the less nuclear you need, less payload you need to create a bigger explosion. And the more sophisticated you get in condensing, the more powerful the weapon. So it isn't more nuclear material. It's actually less nuclear material. But it's the process. How are they able to get the machines that create the process to get the heavy water to enrich the material? And these are very sophisticated systems. So how are you creating the infrastructure? And this is why smart chips matter. Because smart chips allow the systems to do the computations that it needs to do to create the certain types of enrichment. But to do that, you need the programming. It's just not the chips. You can have the chips if you don't have the programmer. And with the programmer, you need the nuclear physicist. So the nuclear physicist tells the programmer, it creates the software that runs the chip that creates the enrichment process, but you still need the materials for the enrichment. So there's a lot of pieces of the chain that you have to put together to create a nuclear program. And so the problem is, we created the World Wide Web. Our military created it. And the problem is, when you create that, you created it without limits. And you allow people to exchange information via email and that from country to country. So how does North Korea, and North Korea was providing Iran nuclear information, because that's only North Korea needed cash, Iran had cash, and so they were selling them. But Iran and North Korea aren't next door to each other. So how were they able to send and receive information? Cellular communication. How were you allowing cellular? How were you allowing, landline communication? Emails that went through fiber optic cables or, cable systems? Because there had to be a pipeline where North Korea, when they did hacks, how are they getting into the pipeline? They don't have satellite systems. North Korea doesn't have satellite systems that I know of. So they weren't beaming it up. But even if beaming it up, they have to transmit it to a receiver. So again, how does that happen? How do you allow tailgating in Chicago without them being beaten to death? That's what I want to know. So again, how do they get the information out? So they can't fly out of North Korea because all air travel is banned, right? So they can't get out of North Korea to travel. Like, you can't fly from Iran to North Korea because you got to go through China or South Korea, right? And then you have to go through international waterways over. So how can they get from Iran or to North Korea? And how can North Korea get from North Korea to Iran? I'm not the problem. You're just a bunch of morons. Truly. And then you hurt me. That makes you incredibly wicked and stupid. But this is the failure of our intelligence agencies in that. Truly, China sits on the UN. China doesn't want Iran to have nuclear missiles because it's a threat to China. And China doesn't want North Korea to have nuclear missiles because it's a threat to China. So China wasn't aiding in any way, willingly aiding North Korea to develop nuclear weapons. China doesn't want nuclear proliferation. It's just like the Soviet Union. They put their own missiles in Cuba and took them out. They didn't help Cuba build the nuclear program. They didn't want Cuba to turn on them and have control of the nuclear missiles. So they put their nuclear missiles in when they had their people there. And the part of the deal was to remove the missiles and remove all Soviet personnel. It was a twofold thing. They had to close up and move the missiles, and they had to take out all military personnel. All military. Now, the KGB still cooperated and so on, but there were no support systems there anymore in Cuba. And so they had to take out all their military personnel, and they had to take out the missiles, all the support systems and so on. But the Soviets, they didn't give them to Cuba. The Soviets didn't give nuclear missiles to where? East Germany, Romania, Czechoslovakia, when they had the wall. They didn't give nuclear missiles to any of them. Why? Because they would be a threat to the Soviet Union. They would be a threat back to the Soviet Union. So they didn't give any of those nuclear capabilities. They didn't give the Ukraine nuclear capabilities. They have a nuclear reactor, they say, okay. But they didn't give them nuclear weapons. And when the wall fell, they understood they didn't give other people. And they weren't selling it. Because even Putin understands that, as he's been attempted to be killed multiple times. You don't know what they're going to do with the material. And so even Russia and China are not that stupid. Because what can be used against your enemy can also be used against you if they turn. So make no mistake about that. So I talk about building out Great Britain. That's awesome. But you have to have an iron bond. And that's what Reagan understood. And there is no breaking from the bond. You cannot have any dissenters. 0 dissenters. Because if you have any dissenters, that's a chink in your armor, and you're highly vulnerable. And so there was no chink between the Prime Minister of Britain, Margaret Thatcher, and Reagan. They were lockstep, and anything that was off, they worked out internally, but they were unbelievable. But the problem is, we keep on rotating people. and you think it's good, well, yes, ultimate power can ultimately corrupt. But you think it's good. And the Bible tells you, God said, I put these in place for a reason. Now, you can purify the system and move somebody in that's pure. But again, you have to work through the infrastructure. And that's what you need to do. Work through the system the Bible's teaching you. The Bible is not wrong. And I used to teach people with referendums and other things to work through the system. Not to be a terrorist. To work through the system. So I learned this. To have people work through the system. As I tell the churches, they're supposed to work through the system. And again, it's ridiculous. So the only threat is this fucking piece of garbage walking down the street. I'm not the problem. Everybody around me is the problem. So as God teaches you with Joseph and Satan, his most beloved, betrayed him. The story is to show them God will not have any betrayal. You turn on me, you burn. But I told you about Jennifer Kim. She turned on me. She burns. If she doesn't repent, she's wasted. But God gave her the ability to cleanse. Not others. Because there are a lot of outlying factors she didn't know about. But if she fails to repent, she's gone. So you don't understand the stories in the Bible and how it teaches you how to operate. But you're talking about massive sophistication and the right way to go about things. The best way to go about things. And these morons, and I consider them morons, as I did like the head pastor at Moody. They're like, oh, the church is so horrible and everything else. Do you know what he did? He created a rebuttal. And he went out there and he studied all the leaders of all these countries around the world, all these governments like the Communist Party and everything else, and how many people they killed and why they killed them. Truly. And then he compared it to religious leaders. And he showed that what was done in the name of God was very little. What was done by the atheist and agnostic was incredible death and dismay and unbelievable. And that's the head pastor at Moody. I don't know if he's still alive. And I heard this in 2005. And I used to listen to Moody Radio. And then they had stuff talking about the dopamine in the brain and how couples bond. Truly. But I thought they were trying to save my relationship. And they had a bunch of stuff on stuff. But people didn't know. And it wasn't a continuous series of things. But it brought up several good points. Moody Radio was very good. And they actually had good Christian music at times. Unlike K-Love, Moody combined it very sophisticated talk shows that dealt into very deep religious issues of people thinking religion is so bad. And the Moody pastor put together all kinds of stuff defending religion against those that were against religion, including the federal government. Those disgusting pieces of garbage. But like anything else, you have to have a pure system in religion, and very godly people are very pure. So religion isn't the problem. And he understands that, and understands that the people that are at the top, you can't have pedophile priests in that. That should have never happened. And if religion is done right, the people at the top are incredibly pure. You can't get a president of the United States like that has incredible morals. So it's a big difference. But he understands that. I wrote a whole piece of paper on 2006 about truly godly people, and it was agnostic, and I wrote about Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Christians, truly finding these truly godly people. I mean, truly godly people. And they're incredibly pure. They would never tailgate me. They wouldn't think about upsetting me. But you pagans, you pieces of unbelievable filth, think breaking the law, Jen, I was with her, breaking the law is not an option. Going about the system in the correct way and creating simulations, but breaking the law is never an option. So you're not godly. You're a piece of garbage in God's eye. So all those illegals are considered pieces of filth. Truly, anyone who breaks the law is considered filth. They're not like me, that I take things and purify things. I turned everybody away. I didn't use anything to create evil upon anyone. I never hurt anyone. I never fed anyone's drug habit. I truly didn't. I turned people away. You are pieces of garbage. So you consider you a good lawyer? Look at the greatest lawyers that the U.S. had, the greatest criminal defense team, the dream team. And what did they do? A multiple murderer who committed many crimes afterwards, they got off. And I said, God bless Johnny Cochran dying. And then Kardashian dying. And then Fitzgerald or Mark, I forget his name. He got busted with $1 million in Florida in the fridge. He died too. The only one is Ellen Dershowitz, and he repented. And he said he made a big, big mistake. He should have never defended OJ. He made a big mistake. I listened to him on the radio talk about how it was the biggest mistake in the world to defend a piece of garbage. And he will never do that. Now he's on the prosecuting side. He flipped. Repenting. Now I'm going to catch all the people that got away with shit. And I'm going to grind them down to nothing. But that's what he said. He flipped, and now he's going after these people that somehow escape punishment. He repented and is atoning. So, you're not godly. So, lying, cheating, and stealing to me or from me makes you Satan and a devil worshiper. You're not godly. You're incredibly evil. So Ellen Dershowitz is the only one who lived. But he's also like the tribe of Judah, the only one that repented. So these people realized that So many people get away with things. They don't want to defend anyone. They want to prosecute everybody. So there's so much garbage to clean up, it's unbelievable. So all I come around here, and you constantly have people breaking the law around me, threatening me constantly. How is that possible? Where before 2016, I never got tailgated. Truly. It was unbelievable. I think I only had one incident, and that was at 18 years old with a semi on a highway. And that never happened again. Yes, I got rear-ended, but it wasn't from tailgating. Truly, none of those were tailgating. Somebody backed up into me. Another person, I was already at the light. They weren't paying attention and ran into me. Another guy's foot slipped off the pedal. None of it was from tailgating. I never got tailgated. Some reason in the last 10 years, all I do is get tailgated. And the funny thing is, Pete and David and others had problems with it. So I have all these people that are very big anti-tailgating. Where are all the protesters? They used to complain on the phone to me, like Pete Mangano, constantly about these tailgating pieces of garbage gotta go down. My partner David Kudo, another one. Truly, they hated these people and thought they should be severely punished. But I never got tailgated. So somehow, now I'm being threatened all the time. And do you know what immense trauma that is? Ask Unya Lee. Because she went to this training and she deals in, psychological trauma. And she went to this training that was developed for deep brain trauma. Deep brain trauma. And all these people thought they were healed. And they did these studies, brain studies, and found out, no. There was this deep brain trauma that they never knew existed before that was buried deeply inside their brain from these incidents, that therapy was only dealing with surface issues and wasn't releasing this deep brain trauma. And so they came up with a whole new technique to be able to reach down deep into the cognitive and pull out the deep brain trauma, healing people, preventing inflammation, Alzheimer's, dementia, all kinds of cognitive declines, memory, you name it. Removing the deep brain trauma. So all you've been doing is burying deep trauma and inflaming my brain. And God is going to put you to waste. You took all the trauma from before that I was burying, like my sexual things, that like being molested as a child. Do you know those synapses buried over? And I forgot about being molested as a child? I truly did. I forgot about it all. I didn't want to remember it. And my brain, to prevent inflammation in that, covered it up. Synapses closed. I didn't remember that trauma at all. But what you've done, and this came up with the first breakdown later, that all of a sudden my mom triggered it because she is like, you've never been sexually molested. And I was going through my first breakdown, and I didn't have a response then. And then all of a sudden, it came back to me. And I was like, you're wrong. I was molested 6-something years old. What do you mean I wasn't molested? But that's what she said to me. And that was during my first breakdown. And it triggered the release, and it brought back all the flood of memories. And I remembered, holy shit. And then I started to remember all the other wrongs to me that I buried, that I didn't remember, that were being brought up. And then you've done it now again, and I was winding back down, trying to get rid of those and release those, and working with, studying Japan, and last ones is saying on to the pedophile pact and many others. And I was working on trying all this anti-pedophile stuff, writing on it and everything else. This is before 2016. And I was trying to release all that deep-seated trauma of homosexuals. Do you know how many times homosexuals have physically molested me in my life? And I have witnesses from Michael Wynn in that, inappropriately groping me. Truly doing many things illegally. So I hate them. I gave them every chance in the book to prove me different. True. And they haven't. They proved me how filthy and disgusting they are. That's why I hate Tim Cook's guts. He is a filthy, disgusting piece of flesh. He is disgusting to me. But the funny thing is, they've been molesting me, homosexuals, since I've been a child. It was a bisexual. He raped a girl, too. But they've been doing this to me my whole life. And I've been denouncing them my whole life. And then you start, I'm trying to cleanse and get out of everything and, purify my mind and body and let go of all of that. And what do? You decide to give me diabetes, neuropathy, arthritis, tinnitus, I don't know how many more issues, rectum issues, you name it, that I never had before. You decided that you're going to even put more deep-seated trauma upon me and be incredibly wicked. And God threatened you. And the whole point was so I wouldn't have to experience this deep-seated pain and suffering again. Like you've given me unbelievable amount of dental issues and urinary tract stuff. Meaning I don't have a urinary tract infection, but also the diabetes. And you just keep on giving me more and more and more issues. Tailgating, loneliness, indebtedness. My credit in 15 and that, all my debt was almost paid off. My credit was moving to perfect. My income was rising rapidly. You threw me back down. And the warning was not to do this trauma to me again. But Unya should testify about how you're causing deep-seated brain inflammation that's killing me. You're literally killing me. And you're enriching yourself. You're killing me and enriching yourself. And God said, there is no excuse in any way, national security or any other excuse for hurting me. The president, how many former presidents did I see? How many places did Jimmy Carter go around the world? Do you know he was there during the Cold War? And he left when Reagan took over. And he knew all that classified stuff, what we were doing with the Soviet Union and the deep heart of the Cold War. And I watched Jimmy Carter and his wife travel everywhere. Do all this stuff. Then I watched George Bush Sr. And he was former head of the CIA and everything. And he was there and so on. And this is after Reagan. But I watched him move around after he left the CIA and then work for it. And then I watch all these people travel and move and live these incredible lives. And so has God watched. And they own the Bushes own the Texas Rangers, and they sit in box seats and go here and there. And I see Jenna Bush on the talk show. And so God said, you can't claim national security or anything. You have no right to suppress me in any way, shape, or form. And if you do, you are hypocrites. As I watched the Clintons and Clinton Cash and them traveling around the world and making deals with all these different leaders around the world, I watched Bill Clinton meet with the U.S. attorney on the runway where she went to the plane. And she wasn't supposed to go to the plane, but she went to the plane and they had a private meeting that was never disclosed. He was on a private plane. The U.S. attorney sat on the plane with her, and it dealt with Hillary Clinton. That's illegal. That's influence. And then all of a sudden, the head of the FBI releases her on all charges. And the U.S. attorney, it was, I think, a black female who met Clinton on the plane and had the conversation. And then all of a sudden, she's not being charged by the FBI and so on. Interesting. But I watch all these people have illegal servers, illegal phones, everything, and they move around. And if it's a problem with them, just like Saudi Arabia said, they were wiping out terrorists and they didn't care how many heads they had to cut off to wipe them out. But they said in 5 years, we will wipe out all terrorism in Saudi Arabia. And now they opened it for tourism. But what did they do before they opened it for tourism? They did a great purge and they killed a lot of people. Oh, they cut off a lot of heads. But they were getting ready for tourism. They wanted to diversify their economy. But before they could diversify their economy, they had to go out and make sure they put to waste any threat to tourists. Because they don't want people coming to Saudi Arabia and being captured and beheaded or anything else. So they went on a great cleanse. Go pull it up. I watched how many heads they chopped off. And it's unbelievable. Hundreds. They guillotined them. Boom, 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 boom. Men, women, boom, 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 boom. Anyone involved. And it was all to diversify their economy, so when they diversified it, the economy wouldn't take a hit from terrorist acts. It seemed pretty smart to me. Now, I don't know about this recent stuff with this U.S. diplomat that somehow, and that seems to go pretty much against what my friends in the Middle East were telling me prior to 2016. So they were going through a great cleansing, and they were killing, they were putting to death a great amount of people. They didn't want them sitting around in their prisons. They didn't want them communicating with people. They wanted them gone. They wanted to kill everybody in the food chain. Any of the money people, anyone involved in the food chain, exterminating it all. So, I don't know. It seems here we don't do that. But it seemed they had great results. And what was that doing? Protecting international tourists. So when they come to Saudi Arabia, no one's going to kidnap them. No one's going to kill them. There isn't going to be no bombings or somebody killed in the mall. But no one's life was spared. They weren't putting them in prison. They were eliminating them. They didn't want them around. Just like they killed the 3 Iranians who came to bomb in Saudi Arabia. They killed the 2 men and women. They chopped off their heads rapidly. They don't want them around. They didn't want them. Iran said, release them to us. No. Saudi Arabia said no. And they put them to death. They didn't want them going back to Iran, telling them what they saw and what they were doing and how they got caught and so on and so forth, so Iran can get more field intel. So they weren't doing a prisoner swap, giving them more inside information. They wanted everything to die with them. So they decapitated them. So Iran didn't get any of that information. Iran said, if you do that, and Saudi Arabia gave them the finger and cut their heads off. They didn't want them going back, refining their... Because Iran already... Remember, Iran's Shiite. Saudi Arabia's Sunni. They weren't going to let these people that were infiltrating and that had all this information to go back and feed Iran more information so they could possibly send back better personnel, learning from the first time how they got caught and, blank, 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 where they made errors so the people coming back can be better. Saudi Arabia said, no, that's not going to happen. And boom, boom, boom. But what did we do? Did we learn from the Italian mafia? Did we learn from the Russian mafia? Did we learn from all these gangs? What do? We feed them back their people. And they learn from their mistakes. And then they come back and they do it even better than before. Isn't that what pedophiles have done and serial rapists and that? They learn how they flawed and how they got caught, and now they're coming back even much more sophisticated. And that's why we've had problems with these organizations. Remember, bin Laden learned from the blind sheik. As we left him alive and the infrastructure alive, we didn't dismantle any of that. And they learned from the first time where they failed. And they refined and they were successful the second time. So they found out a van full of explosives doesn't work. So they refined their technique. So you don't understand why Saudi Arabia did what it did. But they live in the belly of the beast. And they understand. And so they eliminate. They don't want those people. They don't want them to speak ever again. So, yes, peace can be between the Shiites and Sunnis. But they don't want them refining their process. So it's a big deal. Like this guy coming flying up on me. And then look at him fly around me. Truly. Chicago. The belly of the beast. Chicago was known for its filth politicians. Richard M. Daley. He was in conspiracy. I blame the Daleys for JFK. Truly. JFK would have never got elected. Nixon would have been in office. And again, he would have never killed Nixon. So when you do things of corruption, you put the wrong people in the place that shouldn't be there, like taking me out of it and installing somebody else in my role. You're put the wrong people in stewardship. It doesn't work. We're not interchangeable. So again, like Jen's mentorship ended when she left me and went to Tom Lee. She didn't develop anymore. Yeah, she got some more education, but truly, she didn't develop. She didn't develop more godly. Her mentorship stopped. She decided to throw it all in. Everything we created, she threw right down the trash. So Tom Lee wasn't mentoring her. Now, she was mentoring him. But truly, her mentorship stopped. She went on with her education, but not her spiritual mentorship. That all ended. So you keep on wanting to do things that aren't right. Why do you think God created eternal damnation? Because he thinks everybody should be saved? Then there would be no hell. Then there would be no damnation. Then Jesus Christ wouldn't judge the quick and the dead and be ready to put people to waste or put the world to waste if need be. That wouldn't exist. So again, God understands the need to cleanse, as he did through Noah, as he did through King David, wiping out many peoples. So over and over and over again. Now, I believe in more sophisticated, more humane ways of going about things, but also I agree with what Saudi Arabia did. Sometimes you can't leave them around, and they have to be put to waste. It's better for everybody involved. So that's why I'm pro-death penalty, but also staunch pro-life. So I don't agree with this country taking away the death penalty. Sometimes you can't allow these people to exist any longer. But you make your own choices, but I don't see Saudi Arabia doing the wrong thing. I did write to them about talking about, donating organs and everything. Truly. Or donating the body, the head and body, to a medical school. If they don't donate the organs, the body can go to a medical school. And so I'm not saying like in Japan to do little raiders. I'm saying these people, they're being put to death, and you're not putting them to death to get the body. That's what China did, putting prisoners to death to get the organs or get the body. That's not what you're doing. These people willingly did crimes of terrorism that could have potentially killed lots and lots of people. They chose to be put to death. And in turn, they could donate the body to medical school then. And then they could do brain autopsies and figure out the wiring in a terrorist brain. Truly. Figuring out the neuroplasty, studying the dead brain. As Frankenstein did. The movie of Frankenstein, studying the brain, the abnormal, which is funny in Young Frankenstein. He says, what was the name on the jar that you got this brain from? And he's like, I don't quite remember. What was that name? He's like, I think it was Abby. Yeah, Abby. What was the last name? Normal. Yeah, that was it. Abby Normal. You moron. Iran, you brought me an abnormal brain. That's what a terrorist brain is. Abnormal. So you can study the neurochemistry of that brain and the pathways and everything else. And so maybe you can prevent future terrorism. And you can spot future terrorists by doing brain scans and seeing the neural pathways that are developed in a terrorist brain. Because they had one female and 2 males that were terrorists from Iran, but they had many others they caught and put to death. And they could have studied all their brains, doing neural pathway scans and figuring out that, and then they could develop a neural scan. But we have terrorists in jail right now that we should do cognitive scans and figure out the neural, but it's only good and truly the best is when they're first caught. Because the brain changes as they do actions in prison. Because they're not allowed to do certain things, and it starts rewiring the brain. But they could have used all that to prevent cutting off heads in the future. Truly, stopping terrorism is what I want to do. I am for saving lives. But saving lives means nipping it in the bud. Nipping it in the bud. Saving lives that way. So I'll go ahead and leave this video, but I'll go ahead and post on Tumblr studying the neural pathways of a terrorist brain.